Our guest today is a young man going places. Adam Khafif is CEO of LisnUp, a company he's founded when he was still in high school. He joins us via Skype to talk about entrepreneurism, immigrant drive, and values-driven business. Adam, welcome to Feel Like You Belong.
Thank you for having me.
So your company has a cool name and a really cool logo. It's written backwards and it's crossed out. Tell us about that.
Sure. So the company name is LisnUp. It was actually a name that my mom came up with when I was telling her about the idea. And I was explaining to her that I wanted this clothing line to spread positive messages. And she was like, oh, it sounds like you want people to listen up to your messages. And so when you're in a meeting and somebody's trying to get people's attention, everyone yells, listen up, everybody. So it was kind of a catchy name to go with. And we had a bunch of logo variations to begin with, but the one we finally settled on a couple of years ago is the initials of LisnUp, LSNP. So basically fill in the vowels. And then it was based on a quote by Jean-Michel Basquiat, who says, I cross out words so that you'll notice them more. The fact that they are obscured makes you want to read what's behind it. So I thought that was very profound, and I really wanted people to read into the messages, so I decided to apply that same message to my logo. And to take it a step further, I put it backwards so that people really have to look at what's being said. So when I explain that to the people, they really understand, but at first people are like, what? They don't know how to read it, which is cool. I like that. It gives people a different perspective on how to look into the brand.
Sure, and really makes them take a second look at it, so they're not just glancing and going past it.
Definitely,
yeah. Awesome. So you do more than just sell cool clothing. Tell us about the mission of LisnUp.
Right, so when I was younger, like every high school student trying to figure out what they want to do, my father always told me, do something you love, but do something that benefits others. I was a huge fan, I still am a huge fan of music and streetwear, which is what LisnUp technically is, a streetwear brand. And so I decided to combine those two interests along with my father's advice and do something that set itself apart in the streetwear industry. Not too many brands are doing something that is positive or encouraging to the youth. So I wanted LisnUp to represent that and be that odd brand in that crowded space.
So let me just interrupt to ask, for our older viewers, what is streetwear?
Streetwear is more urban apparel. It's what you'll find in hip hop, more pop culture wear. It's I guess now it's identified by more neutral colors, maybe slimmer pants, larger shirts. It always changes, but it's really what the celebrities at the top of the chain are wearing, I guess, is what you classify as streetwear in the moment.
And so it is a bit of a shifting target.
Oh, definitely, yeah. I guess the demographic age stays the same, but the kids that we're selling to that are 18 to 21 they're now 25. So we have to retarget it to the 18 to 21 to see what they're wearing now, because it's a lot different from what I was wearing just 5 years ago.
Sure. Do you see yourself expanding into older markets, or at this point, this is really your target age group, your target market?
I think we have a strong hold in this target market, but I definitely want to make something more towards, LisnUp started by making clothes that I was wearing when I was 15. So I would love to shift it to be able to continue making clothes that I currently wear, because it's just easier to make something that you wear every day. You know what you're passionate about. But I still wear tees and hoodies. I think it's interesting because when we were 15, I really don't see us not wearing hoodies in 10 years. My parents would never wear a hoodie out, but they just weren't really around. Like, that wasn't the thing to do when they were younger. So I think streetwear will continue to rise in age. Even when we get older, it'll have some type of form. It'll hold some type of place in culture.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about your immigrant roots, both on your mother's side and your father's side.
Sure. So my mother's grandparents were from Italy and Ireland, respectively. And like most immigrants, they came over with nothing. And her parents had to struggle every day to support 5 children. They lived in a small house in the projects. And so she really didn't have a choice but to work hard every day to make it to where she is now. And that's the same for my father, who came from Morocco. He came to the States for education, but he couldn't afford it. So he ended up just sort of doing his own entrepreneurial endeavors, managing convenience stores. And then that led him to, after my mom and him were married, they opened their own wholesale bakery that now serves most of the New England region with Italian cookies. So they use their roots and their hustle to sort of create their own opportunities, which is, I mean, inspiring for everyone, but especially just being able to see it firsthand and seeing how they run a business with absolutely no business education is definitely 70 to 100% of the reason why I do what I do now.
Sure. And so, in fact, you are not an accidental entrepreneur. You had this role modeled for you.
No, definitely. And seeing them run a business at a young age got me very interested in business. I mean, it's like if your father's a scientist, you're likely going to be very interested in science and have a leg up on everyone else in science class. So that was me for business. And I was lucky enough that my high school had just introduced a business course when I went there, which not too many high schools provide the opportunity, but I was so into it and I would read ahead. I would be that business nerd in class, and it was definitely because of my parents. And then the work ethic can't be taught, but it has to be instilled, and you learn it at a young age just from leading by example.
Sure, sure. So tell us a little bit about your parents' company.
So it's called Tony's Own Cookies. It's actually my grandmother's recipe, just repurposed. And so back to the story of my dad owning convenience stores, my mother would make cookies to sell at the convenience stores just to boost sales. And I mean, she was taking care of the kids at the time. She wasn't working. And the cookies were flying off the shelf, and they figured to themselves, oh, we might have something here. So they opened up a small hole in the wall, basically, where they just started hand scooping cookies. And I remember like making forts with the boxes that they were using because I was a kid, I couldn't work. And they would go out and sell to stores, and then eventually stores started picking them up, and stores came to them asking them to hold the cookies. And they expanded to a larger warehouse, which at the time we were like, there's no way we're going to fill this. This is going to take 10 years. And within maybe 5, we moved to an even bigger place that we're almost maxing out now. So, I mean, it's just the hustle. My mom wakes up every morning at 4 or 5, and during Christmas time, 3 a.m. to hand scoop. And I mean, now they have machinery and a bunch of employees to help, but it's always, I mean, it's a family recipe. So she treats it like her own, like her baby. So it's inspiring seeing the hustle. And then my father does the business side of it, and my mother does more of the production side of it. So they make a perfect team. They don't get in each other's way. People say don't start a business with your friend or your partner, but they make sure to stay clear of each other, and that's how it works very smoothly.
So people are saying that you shouldn't work together with a family member.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one advice that a lot of entrepreneurs give is don't start a business with your best friend, and definitely not with your spouse. I mean, money issues is a reason for most of the divorces. And so imagine running a business and trying to struggle and succeed with all of that. It's a lot of extra stress, but it's kind of like they run 2 separate businesses and just keep each other updated and informed, and it works perfectly together like that.
Sure. So how many employees do they have?
They have about 15 to 20 employees now, and they work, I mean, during their busy season, sometimes they're working on Saturdays, but usually it's Monday through Friday, and they have, so that's about 15 in-house employees and then 2 or 3 drivers that are making delivery routes around Mass and around New England.
Wow, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So how old is the company?
So it's now 12 years, started in 2004.
So do you still help out, or are you 100% at LisnUp?
No, when I was actually in college, on my vacations, I would help out. I was actually one of the delivery men in the winter when the busy season, when I was on winter break, which was, I mean, easy gig, and it helps them, which is perfect. So now I'll just do like their marketing material, their logos. I design all of their packaging. I design their vehicles. So they're able to leverage whatever skills I've taught myself along the way.
Very cool. Very cool. So it tickled me to read on your website about LisnUp and the founding, because you said you made your first sale to your aunt.
Yeah.
So you got to love family members who support us in these early ventures, right?
No, definitely. I mean, when you're 15, you wanna click live on the website, and you just want everyone from around the world to buy it. But sure enough, my aunt was the first one waiting, which is cool. And what's interesting is exactly a year later, she gave that shirt to me in a frame, which is cool. I found it yesterday.
It was your first sale.
Exactly. So I still have to hang it up, but that was really cool. And I mean, her and her family have always supported, and it's really cool because sometimes you wonder if people support because you're so young and you're trying it out, if they support because they actually support. And it was really rewarding to see that.
So, looking at this high school kid, when did you start setting your sights on college, and how did you end up at Babson?
College. My mom was always pestering me to apply early, and she made me do all of my applications in the summer before I could even start applying, and I hated her for it, but I thanked her eventually. I knew I wanted to go to business school, and so my guidance counselor gave me a list of business schools, and Babson was one of them, and I looked into it, and it was the #1 school in the country for entrepreneurship, and I was like, this is definitely where I want to go. And then when I toured the school, I was like, definitely where I want to go. And but what's interesting is I wasn't going to go if I didn't get a scholarship. Like Babson prices, I mean college prices in general are ridiculous, and
It's a private school,
so
right?
yeah. And so when I got my acceptance letter, we were like, oh, this is cool, gone to Babson. And I walked away, and then my mom came over and just like grabbed me. She's like, you got a scholarship, because like it's hidden at the bottom. And I was like, she started hitting me, and I was like, what are you doing? So luckily I was able to go and make the most of the 4 years and met some of my best friends there. The experience is incredible because you think it's normal when you're there because everyone's going to Babson, but when you talk to someone outside of Babson, they're like, wow, I have class. I never had a class on Friday. And they're like, wow, I have class every Friday. And that's just, you learn that Babson gives you a lot of time to work on your own entrepreneurial endeavors. Every freshman actually starts a business their freshman year. And my class elected me CEO of the business. So I was CEO of 30 people for an entire year, which was a brand new experience. And it was a lot harder than running a one-person company like I was already running. But it was a great time. It was a great school too.
Yeah, awesome. So you continued LisnUp through college.
Yes, I started in high school, continued through college, and really picked up on it. I would go a lot harder on it in the summer, only because I had the guilt of my parents telling me to study, and parents guilt you into, you owe us good grades and things like that. So I had to ease off the pedal during the school year, but in the summer and vacations, I would work tirelessly on it, and a lot of opportunities fell on LisnUp when I was in college, which allowed it to sort of keep growing momentum and gain the support of some students there that actually one of them still helps me with LisnUp every day, which is really awesome.
Sure. So I learned about your business through the Arab American National Museum in Dearborn, Michigan. Because you came and you had an event there, but I wasn't familiar before with pop-up shops. Talk about how those work.
Pop-up shop. Well, okay, so essentially usually you rent out a store for a day, and the store will charge you a certain fee because they're losing out on their sales for the day. So that's fair. And what you get is, if it's in a prime location, you get all of the store's usual customers coming by and saying, oh, LisnUp. Well, I wonder what that is. They're taking over this store that I always go to, and they'll come and they'll buy it. So it's like cross-marketing, basically. And that's huge for a brand like LisnUp, who can't afford a monthly lease and minimum payments and all of that. So what's interesting is we wanted to do pop-up shops, and obviously we're working with journalist Noor Tagore, who has a cult-like following among Muslim women. It's amazing. She's doing amazing things, and people want to meet her. So we were like, we could leverage both the clothing that we were collaborating on and a meet and greet. And so we decided to do pop-up shops. And what's interesting is we didn't have the idea until a place invited us to do a pop-up shop there. And since we were donating 50% of the profit to charity, everywhere that we wanted to do a pop-up shop allowed us to use the space for free because it was for a great cause. They get to market it as a charitable event on their behalf, and they're supporting a young brand. So we did 5 or 6, and Dearborn was one of them. We also did Boston, DC, and 2 in New York, and then 1 recently in LA. And I mean, the support, one thing that's interesting is the support of the hundreds of people that come to meet you is incredible, but what's even more incredible is that these are businesses giving their space away for free because they believe in you, and that's priceless. So yeah, that's actually really cool that you found out about us from that place is amazing. The space was incredible.
Well, and we just interviewed for our 100th anniversary or 100th episode show the founder of the museum, Dr.
Wow,
Dr.
beautiful.
Anan Ameri. So
Amazing, yeah.
stay tuned. That will be coming out online very shortly.
That's awesome.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I want to talk a little bit about your collaboration with Noor, because she has a special mission, a special project that she's working on, and talk about how you dovetailed your work.
Sure. So it goes back to how LisnUp kind of first started. So what happened was there's an artist that goes by the name of Lupe Fiasco, and he's a hip hop artist, and hip hop has a stigma of misogyny and drugs, and so Lupe made his claim to fame by talking about social consciousness, and that was someone that I looked up to when I was a kid, and so I wanted to be the Lupe Fiasco of clothing, of streetwear. That was my mission, and sure enough, 2 years in, we tweeted Lupe Fiasco, and he agreed to work with us, and that was like a dream come true. So we collaborated with him on a shirt for Ramadan. So during that time, my friends and I were taking road trips and selling at events. One event that we went to was in DC. The Islamic Society of North America was holding an event in DC. And so we set up a table there. And this was right after we released our first Lupe Fiasco shirt. And sure enough, there's a crowd of girls, and they're following Noor Tagori, who's walking over to our table. And obviously, I knew who she was. I didn't know if she knew what the brand was, but she was wearing our Lupe Fiasco shirt. And I was like, this is an incredible coincidence. And we talked about working on something then, but it was more of a, yeah, let's work on something. Sure, okay, see you later. And 2 years later, I met her in Boston, and I gave her some more shirts. And then actually about a year ago, on her birthday, I messaged her, just stayed in touch, and then asked if she wanted to work on something. And it was right after she had finished her major documentary called Forest Haven about a mental institute. And so she was free for that time, and we just dug in, and we wanted to make something special. So I asked what she was passionate about, and she was passionate about combating sex trafficking, because it's just a huge issue that is just really swept under the rug. And so she sent me all these videos and documentaries to watch to kind of do my research on it. And it took us about a month. We designed the entire collection. We released it, planned our first pop-up shop, and then it just got picked up and by Business Insider, Huffington Post, and all these great publications were recognizing what we were doing. And of course, Noor's following loved that she was dabbling into clothing and showing her versatility as a personality, a journalist, a designer. And it was incredible because she would give a speech at the pop-up shops about sex trafficking, and it's fun because you're touring, but it's also very emotional seeing how people are affected by it and how they're affected by how amazingly Noor speaks, and how they're touched by just the top. It's a 10-minute talk at a pop-up shop, but people get so emotional about it, and it's an incredibly rewarding experience.
Well, this gives you a chance to connect with people about values issues, and at the same time pursue your entrepreneurial dream. And in this case, you're doing business, you're marketing, social media, you're also doing design. So you're just wearing lots of hats.
Yeah,
and good-looking hats.
Thank you. Yeah, shameless promotion.
Yeah, good. You got to do that, man.
Yeah, it's everything that I love. So designing, music, just working with incredible people, and giving back, which is, giving back is the most selfish act because you feel incredible after you do it.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
And so in addition to working with Lupe and Noor, you had a chance to work with several other people, rappers, singers, NFL players.
Yeah, so when we were touring and selling at all of these events, our first, major break were these NFL players who found our stuff and emailed us after to work with us, which was huge because I'm a huge football fan, and that was amazing. And so yeah, that was our first major one. And then Olympic athlete Ibtihaj Muhammad saw us from there, and she said, "Oh, you work with the NFL players? I'd love to work with you as well." We worked with her. Her collection did amazing.
it was all about women's empowerment and empowering women and young girls through sports, and also encouraging them to wear the hijab or keep it on through everything that's going on. And then from there was Lupe Fiasco to Noor Tagore, and now singer Yuna, who's a Malaysian Muslim singer. But she just came off of a huge album where she collaborated with Usher, and she's going on tour around the world, and she's an incredible person. So it was great to work with her, and we're doing a collection in support of refugees.
Fantastic.
So that's sort of our next one right now.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we're going to have to wrap up, but final word, what advice do you have for young entrepreneurs?
Oh, it's my favorite.
Whether they're immigrants or homegrown kids, and you're actually a homegrown kid, so.
Yeah, I am. So I would say, I mean, I'm very competitive, and if you're an entrepreneur, it's assumed that you're a pretty competitive person. And so I challenge myself, and I challenge everyone that's watching to, at the end of the day, when they sink into their bed and they let that sigh of relief out, pull out your phone, scroll through your contact list, and find one person that worked harder than you that day. And challenge yourself the next day to make sure that you can't find anyone that worked harder than you. I mean, everyone has different resources. Everyone has, money, location. I'm not in LA. I'm in Boston. There's nothing clothing related here. There's no fashion district. But I can look through my phone every night and say that with my resources, keeping all things equal, I work the hardest out of anybody that I know. So I'm always the hardest worker that I know, and I challenge everybody to be the hardest worker they know. Not in business, in life, religion, spirituality, just anything. You can apply that across the board, and it's really important. When you start thinking in that way, failure will be nothing. I mean, failure won't even be hard, because you'll understand that you did everything you could, and maybe it just wasn't meant to be, or there's another path. But if you can work hard at everything that you do, then every failure will be a lesson, and every success will just be a stepping stone.
That's fantastic. We're going to have to leave it there, but I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
This is incredible.
You're awesome.
I had grown up in West Africa, but my parents were from 2 different countries, and so that in of itself was a unique space.